Oonagh Williams is a chef and an instructor who has a culinary arts degree that she got when she trained in London and Switzerland. She is now based in New Hampshire and over the years has developed a huge reputation as an award-winning, fiercely independent chef and instructor. In this interview we look at how to avoid the dangers of food, how to eat cheaper, why it's best to put money into food rather than medicine. We answer the question, is eating gluten-free just a fad? Tackle the advantages of eating good, wholesome, organically grown food. Briefly uncover the wicked curse of the supposedly gluten-free convenience foods, and so much more. So let's join Alain and Oonagh now and find out what it really means to be gluten-free.
Good morning, Oonagh, and welcome to the Low Carb Paleo Show.
Good morning, Mark. Good morning, Alain. Welcome to New Hampshire from the warmth of Texas and the probably miserable grey of France.
It's quite nice, actually. I can't complain.
Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Alain. You're looking dapper as usual.
Yeah, well, I had to make an effort. I didn't wear my old T-shirt with holes because we're on camera, so I dressed up.
So
I dressed up a little bit. I know, you know. When you live alone, you don't have, you don't need to dress up every day like when you go to work, right? Well, I see you all dressed up in your...
You're not wearing your good clothes to go to do the housework, yes. Yes, I put my chef's jacket on to prove the point. Yeah. Yes. Looking good, looking good.
So, Oonagh, you and I are gluten-free chefs and book authors. But while I'm semi-retired, you're a very busy chef in the gluten-free world. Can you give us a little background on yourself?
Well, like you, I was classically trained with a culinary arts degree, and probably according to age anyway, we grew up on real food compared to many people nowadays. I did train in London and Switzerland, so I've always cooked from scratch from real ingredients. So when I came to America about 20 years ago, I couldn't work in a restaurant because the standards even then were far below what we'd been taught. So I tended to do cooking classes, dinner parties, catering and everything like that with real food. And about 5-6 years ago, my son, very good English background of knowing his beer and his wine, and once he graduated university and was out on his own in New York City, overdosing on the beer, and he grew up learning to cook even though he's a business major, so he was making the lasagna and the shrimp alfredo and all the high fat, high wheat, high everything, and was getting sicker and sicker until a friend said, you know, you've got the same symptoms as me, I've just had the endoscopy and yes, I've got celiac disease. So, you know, that, and he'd had no prior symptoms, which most doctors think it's just stomach, and he hadn't had prior symptoms, but for him it was triggered by a car accident. So mother's guilt trip, I started doing totally gluten-free for him. And as you know, real food is basically naturally gluten-free. It's only the baking you change. So I didn't have to do much different apart from baking. And with a food background, I could easily turn an awful lot of the baking into good gluten-free because I knew what I was doing. So I was doing that for him. And then I discovered a few years later when I was giving a talk on food for the gluten-free diet that a nurse said to me she was only diagnosed with celiac disease when her 2 little ones had anaphylactic reactions. And this is a nurse that should know. And within 2 period cycles, her neurological and all her period problems went away. And I know you're guys, but I tend to make this point about the period problems and female problems because that is a classic for a gluten reaction. Doctors think it's stomach. Female problems are absolutely classic. And when I look at my family background and all the women's problems of infertility and miscarriages, it's classically gluten. So I went totally gluten-free. And my arthritis went away, which I'd had for years based on a bad ski accident. All my female problems went away. And the blood test, the regular blood test for gluten said negative, at which I've now realized it's only 50-50 accurate, which we didn't know 5 years ago and most doctors don't know. And then I was talking at the Atlanta Gluten Intolerant Conference in May, and someone said to me, I'd admitted I used to taste test a teaspoon and come home and recreate something. And this was about 3 years ago. I would let myself taste test. And they said, you know, you're harming yourself if it's celiac disease and you're taste testing. Came back, my physical was the next month. There I had the celiac disease genetic markers. I'm incredibly sensitive anyway. So I was told, yeah, with your markers and sensitivity, there's no way you're anything but celiac disease. Don't even think of doing that 6 weeks gluten challenge where the doctors like you to eat a slice of bread a day to get sick so they can prove it by an endoscopy because you're damaged. But yes, so I have celiac disease now, which we didn't know. My son is both celiac and dairy intolerant. So with the food background, I know food an awful lot better than many, many people out there purporting to know dairy and gluten-free and all the other food allergies and really don't know what they're talking about, which I'm sure, Alain, you've seen with far too many people. They say they're experts and scaringly they're not. So
right. And most of them don't have a background in traditional
food.
culinary or anything, so they
and that makes a huge difference. Yeah,
they don't know how to translate from the gluten-loaded world to the gluten-free world without tasting horrible. Yes. Most of gluten-free foods out there, most of them, not all, taste pretty bad.
I use the word disgusting. That's the word I use, disgusting. I freely admit it. And even when I go to conferences and speak and I'll taste test stuff, I'm thinking at least 50% of it is still disgusting and it's in the market.
And people are buying it.
Yeah, and they don't know any better. I mean, I've written for the National Foundation for Celiac Awareness for nearly 4 years now with a monthly column going between healthy soup, salads, entrees to then indulgent baking or whatever, because people want the indulgent baking. Even when I did regular cooking classes, it was the party stuff they wanted to learn how to do. But it's scary that the stuff that's out there, and as you and I both, well, all three of us know, processed or commercial gluten-free or any of these diet foods are not healthy. They put far more fat and sugar and sodium in to make up for the lack of taste. And I say the same as you, you know, sugar is an addiction. I think, they're saying 150 pounds a year is what the amount of sugar an ordinary American eats. I'm thinking, I don't have anything like 3 pounds of sugar a week. Who's having my share?
Yes.
No?
I know. It's like, I have a jar of organic turbinado sugar, and I haven't opened it. I mean, it's so not used that the sugar is now solid because of the humidity. It's just compacted and it's now solid. So I can't imagine who would basically eat my share like you.
But they do. You've only got to look at the grocery. I mean, I say, and I'll put it in now because you're French, so you're slim. Yes, I know I'm not slim, but my numbers are excellent. And that's what they'll tell you is good. It's your numbers that's important. And normally I will say in something public, and you can see from my hair and skin that I'm healthy. You know, and that shows it. I mean, it's unfortunate I'm not skinny. Some of it is the celiac disease. Some of it is shoulders this size. You know, when you've got the bone structure, you'd look pretty sick if you were skinny. But people don't know what they're doing. It's scary. Sugar is, as we both know, sugar is more of an addiction than cocaine and everything else.
There's a tendency for people to shift sideways, so they go from regular cookies to gluten-free cookies, and I have to remind them, keep in mind that junk food is junk food, whether it's gluten-free or not.
Yes.
And in order to make it taste better, they even add more sugar in the gluten-free cookies typically, and all sorts of additional ingredients to make it somewhat tasty. When it's, I mean, you and I know it's not that difficult to turn unless it's bread and croissant. That I typically would not mess with.
I can make gluten-free brioche.
Can you?
I make good gluten-free brioche. Yes.
Okay, I'd like to see that because it's. People keep on asking me, can I do croissant and puff pastry gluten-free? And I say no. There's no gluten. There's no way you can layer, because the gluten is what keeps the layer of fat isolated from each other, and that's what allows the dough to rise.
Well, I actually have a recipe in French for gluten-free croissant that I got from France. I just haven't made them yet because of the time factor. But I keep saying it's still not going to taste the same as the regular wheat.
No,
it can be good, but it's not going to taste the same. You know?
Right. No,
I mean, it was a
absolutely
good
not.
brioche, but no, it wasn't the same. But it was still very, very good compared to anything I've tasted out there of even an ordinary bread roll. And
Well,
people, you know,
when I was teaching gluten-free classes, I had this really great recipe of a Provençal loaf, gluten-free, and people loved it. And
mhm,
it's in my book, but honestly, whatever tried, whenever I tried to do croissant, and it's just a complete fiasco for me.
yeah,
I mean,
yes,
I would turn up with croissant-shaped rolls, but
yeah,
not the real croissant,
yeah, yeah,
fluffy, light, and
yeah, yeah.
flaky.
Yeah, I mean, I bought some recently. There's a restaurant, a bakery in Massachusetts that does croissants, and they were solid, they were dense, they had a very strange off flavor. And you think, did they even know what real croissants tasted like in the first place? Most of them don't. And that's what I would say. I knew the flavor of the real food in the first place to try and recreate it gluten free. And I normally say my 6'4" baby would soon tell me if my gluten free wasn't as good as my regular wheat. Take a pause, a breath, and say, and my husband's far politer, you know, because
Right.
you know what your sons are like. They're not going to be polite. If it doesn't taste good, they're going to tell you, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
But
It's
yeah, I
true.
mean, it has to taste good. And I didn't buy all that junk food in wheat flour days. Why would I buy it in gluten-free days when it's even less healthy? It's got far more
Yeah, I
junk in
mean,
it.
but the thing in this society, and I mean in America, or I understand England is fairly much the same too, is that people are addicted to convenience food and junk food and fast food and all these packaged products. When it's if you know about cooking, it's so easy to just eat fresh food that is gluten free.
Yeah, it just blows my mind that people just don't know. But in fairness, they've never been taught. I think the food, what do they call it? Family and consumer science classes in schools now are totally useless. They're written by idiots at both state level and government level who don't know food, don't know what people need to learn. I keep saying, even though my son is a business major, not culinary, he grew up learning how to cook or knowing how to cook. So it's a godsend now that he's out on his own because he cooks decent food.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
growing up, I had to say to him, will you stop? How ridiculous. Would you stop eating your vegetables and eat some of your meat? Because he's happily eaten all his veg. And I mean, that's very rare in America to love
Yeah,
your
yeah.
vegetables.
Yeah, it's
And,
the same with my
you know,
son. He's 33 now, and he's on his own, and he can cook for himself, no problem at all. He decided not to follow in my footsteps as a chef because he realized
they know
how
it's
tough
too
a
much
job
like
it is.
hard work.
It is hard
Yes.
work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
too
it
much
is.
hard
Yeah.
work. But he can take care of himself. His mom taught him how to cook, and when he was young, he used to work with me in the kitchen, in the
Yes.
business. So
Yeah.
he can definitely take care of himself. So he likes to. One of the pleasures we have is we go out and have a nice dinner, and we're very picky, as you can imagine,
Yes.
and not just me, him too. It's like
Oh, yes. Yeah.
he knows exactly where to go. He knows what also what I know, what I like and don't like, and then we enjoy having a good time, just
Yeah.
having good dinner.
When you know where you're going to eat and you're picky, you're going to get real food.
Yeah,
You're not going to
yeah.
go to the junk places. And
Well,
your body feels so much better on the real food. And it is easy to do.
we're lucky that we're in Austin. We have quite a few good local restaurants that are serving and are buying and serving local food that is locally grown, locally
Yes.
made, fresh, supporting the local economy. I'm sure you have that where you live as
We
well,
ha
right?
Yes, in New Hampshire and Mass and all of New England, we have an awful lot of farms locally where you can, as you say, get the grass-fed beef, get the fresh milk, get the goat's milk, we even have the winter indoor farmers market, so you can get your veg that way. We have a lot of the CSA, the community supported agriculture. I actually brought my own hydroponic system in from my garden last weekend because I grow my salad, vegetables, and my herbs in an hydroponic that's outside in the decent weather, and I bring it in for the winter. And just going and snipping your own fresh herbs and your own salad, wonderful difference. But people don't know it. I mean, again, same as yourselves, don't we sound so wonderful saying, you know, what we called everyday food, other people call gourmet, because we didn't grow up on grilled cheese sandwiches and hot dogs.
Yeah.
We only ever had hot dogs when we went to one of the big fairs, because there was basically nothing else to eat. But I mean, it's junk. You put junk food in, as we said, you're going to get junk body out. Healthy cooking is healthy living. I keep going on and on and on. And it's not just the gluten-free. It's everything out there that the people don't realize the chemicals in the food, what it's doing. You know, I mean, you and I both go on about GMO. And, you know, people don't understand what GMO means. In fact, what genetically engineered means. I've got a talk with someone coming up later this month. I was on the radio talking to the director of the National Grange in Washington. National Grange in Washington is not in favor of GMO labeling. National Grange in New Hampshire wants GMO labeling so people can know. The difficulty is for us in New England, not just New Hampshire, but the 6 New England states, is for GMO labeling to be passed. It's going to be all of the 6 states. Otherwise, there are problems with deliveries. And I was investigating it in New Hampshire because it was defeated. And I'm thinking, this is an agricultural state. Why is this being defeated? And I was looking at the votes, and it wasn't on party lines. It wasn't on town or country lines. It was based on people that had read the legislation and understood it. Because if it was passed in New Hampshire and in New England, the onus was going to be on the small local farmer to prove everything was GMO, not on the food producers bringing stuff in, not in these huge agri-combines who won't tell you the truth. And that's why it was defeated in New Hampshire. But all these people that are up in arms don't realize that. They just think GMO is terrible, and why aren't we passing laws? Well, look into the difficulty of getting it. And as we both know, if Monsanto was so good, why are 64 countries in the world not letting Monsanto in?
Yeah,
you know, and if the FDA is so
64, yeah, up to 64. Well, Vermont did pass there, and they are being sued now by the Grocery Association, right?
Yes, they've got money being put together to pay for that lawsuit, yes.
I don't know if you're aware, but recently there's been a new development. Major food companies are turning against genetically engineered corporations like Syngenta and Monsanto and suing them because they sold them products that China or Japan refused to buy. So basically, they sue Syngenta for $1 billion because they did not get their seeds approved by the Chinese, and the Chinese have been basically refusing to buy the corn and then all the you know, genetically engineered. So there's a shift happening to where now the industry, the food industry, is going after the seed companies like Syngenta and Monsanto, Dow, and so on and so forth. Say, hey, wait a minute, you can't sell us products that
we can't
foreign countries we can sell. You know, and so they refuse. Not only they refuse to buy it, which of course hurts the farmers now, but they also sue those companies because say, well, we lost billions of dollars of sales because of you, and so now, you know, so there's a shift.
The problem is that some of the top Monsanto people are now in the FDA. So how much can we trust anything happening that way?
Not at all.
Yeah, and I normally say, do you want to trust your health to the assumption all these big companies are following even FDA labeling guidelines? And we know it's money talks to the FDA. So they're going to get fined the billions of dollars, and they're going to say, oh, no, we can't afford to pay it. Yeah, right. I mean, did you see just in recent weeks, some companies were importing honey into America and adulterating it and lying as to what it was? They were fined a load of money. They're only paying $1 or $2 million. Big deal. Yeah. You know, that's perhaps one shipment, you know.
Corporations will do anything to make an extra buck on the back of their customers, even if it makes them sick.
What I can't believe is that, you know, the bodies that are there set in place to look after the health of the general population just aren't doing their job.
Yeah, which is what I say all the time. Yes, yeah, very definitely. I mean, one of the talks I now give, not just to the celiac disease community, but generally into corporate lunch and learns, is the same power of food, best medicine or worst poison. And I talk about GMOs and trans fats and the new fats, flours, sugars, and how much sugar is too much sugar. And people are so incredibly ignorant. I'm saying, do you realize, I mean, I've had people with true dairy allergy get sick because things like canned tuna and canned chicken have whey powder in it, and it's the same nonsense as trans fat at under 0.5%. They don't have to include it on the label, so people are getting sick. I mean, the lack of transparency in America about food is literally criminal.
Yeah.
And I'll say things at talks, and as we said, knowing food, people know we know food. An expo I was at the other week, I was listening to the other presenters, and there was this nutritionist, very nice lady, very knowledgeable, but not on a food allergy diet. And she was saying, are gluten-free oats safe? Oh, yes, they are. Well, no, they're not. You know, you have to, you're told to be off even gluten-free oats for 6 months while you heal. And I'm one of those that still can't tolerate gluten-free oats. Then she was saying, is distilled vinegar safe for gluten-free? Well, no. I mean, most of us would say distilled white vinegar should be used for cleaning your windows. Yeah. And I mean, like, I grew up on the real French wine vinegar for cooking, and then our malt vinegar for our fries, which I really miss, and for our pickles. You know, it's just not the same without malt vinegar.
No, it's not. That's very true.
You know, I was looking at bottles of vinegar the other year because, again, like you, I've got my red, my white, my balsamic, my champagne, my sherry, all these vinegars, and I'm looking at them, and some are saying made from wine or grapes, apples or cider. Others are just saying diluted to so many % acidity. And I started making phone calls. The ones saying, for the most part, the ones saying diluted to so many % acidity are just distilled alcohol. Made to be a wine vinegar. And you look at the price, it's the price of $1.50 versus $5. So it's very, very obvious. And I don't care if it's distilled to be gluten-free. It's fake. It's not real. So I get very upset.
And it's distilled from GMO corn.
Exactly. And you know, all these people going on about how wonderful soy is. Well, 94% of soy and corn is GMO. What's that doing to our bodies? You know, I don't know if GMO is bad, but they're not telling us the truth. That's my whole contention.
Well, as you know, today there's a major vote in Oregon and Colorado regarding labeling GMO. Do you think that either one of them will pass?
No, I really don't. There was not Michael Pollan, but somebody else said, you know, if GMO is so good, why are we not getting the truth about it? Why are they not happily labeling stuff as being GMO if it's that good? But having said that, one of the reps and the Senate in Concord in New Hampshire, when we were talking this GMO thing, he said insulin was done GMO about 20 years ago. And nobody can deny that insulin is a lifesaver. So my point is, I truly don't know if GMO is good or bad, but if 64 countries aren't happy with it, and if they won't be transparent in their labeling, you really have to wonder what's going on. If it's that wonderful, why are you not telling us the truth? Same, did you know that trans fats, I was looking trans fats up on Wiki the other day, huge write-up, and saying all about England banning trans fats now, and all the big companies voluntarily removing it, and America it's still taking time because... And, you know, they can tell you there's 0 trans fat if it's got 0.5% in it. So you have to look for hydrogenated. And yet you can't ban trans fat because it naturally occurs in certain animals. You know, so what do you do? But let's be honest. You know, that's the whole point. They are not honest. That's why I rant and rave at all these talks that they're not honest. You and I keep going on about sugar. Well, it was the sugar lobby that made fat out to be the evil thing 20 years ago.
It was, yeah.
You know, and going on about agave nectar being wonderful. No, agave nectar is not wonderful. If you look at the recipes, they quote the same quantity of agave nectar as maple syrup and corn syrup, when you should be using about half the quantity. And it's only if you use half the quantity it's a better GI. Otherwise, it's worse than high fructose corn syrup. You see, I just go on and on and on because I get so cross.
Right. Well, I was as I was sitting here and listening to what we're saying, I realized that it was just basically 2 Europeans bitching and moaning about what's going on in America, right? So I'm not sure.
It's bad, yes.
We might be banned.
We know it. Well, no, because I truly find whether I do classes, speaking at expos, going into corporate and doing health fairs or lunch and learns, I see that light bulb going off in people's faces when they say, I didn't realize that.
No.
You know, and I say, do you realize 64 ounces of soda has 46 teaspoons of sugar. And lots of people we know buy that 64 ounces.
Yeah.
I have a friend lives on that stuff. I mean, it's utterly, again, my favorite word, disgusting. I mean, if Pepsi Cola can melt pearls off a string of pearls, what's it doing to your insides? And if you think of it, if you're using Splenda or aspartame, that's liquid poison. And
Definitely,
it still does as much a job. It's probably worse for your body than the real sugar. I mean, I don't give up sugar. I still do good baking. And I say I have a sweet tooth, but I don't have a sickly sweet tooth, you know. But again, we don't do sugar every day of the week in baking. You know, it was a Sunday treat. It was the plain cookie when you came in from work or from school. It wasn't all day, every day sugar.
A lot of people in America have this impression that French people eat pastries all the time. It's not true. It's a once a week treat. Yes. We go to the bakery after church. You pick up your box of pastries or exceptionally, you'll get a birthday cake from the bakery, and that's it, once a week. Yes. We don't gorge ourselves with croissants or cookies every day, you know. So, again, it's a matter of quality over quantity.
Yeah. And it is same. Mark must be the same. We've got to have our biscuit with our cup of tea at 4 in the afternoon. No, I'm sorry. It's a genetic thing. No, I can't.
And instead I have a slice of cheese. Or a few slices of saucisson or something like that.
Well, I have that like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock because we don't eat dinner at 5 o'clock like Americans do. We're far later. So I'll have that slice of saucisson or cheese at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. 4 o'clock with my cup of tea with my Earl Grey in a teapot, not a mug. I miss my digestive biscuits. I can make gluten-free versions of hobnobs. I make those that are good. You know, or I'll you know, something like that, a shortbread that I will make, you know, not dripping with sugar, but you just need something with that cup of tea. It's genetic. It's race memories.
I mean, to be totally frank, we don't have biscuits in the house because, you know, you open the packet and they're gone.
Oh yes, yes.
You know, I've got no self-control, so I've found the best place to have self-control is in the supermarket.
Yes, yes.
Because I'm thinking, well, I can buy that and pay money for it and poison myself, or not buy it and save money and spend it on something I really want. Oh, I'll do that.
Yeah. No, it's funny. I've got the hairdresser tomorrow, and they normally say, because I will normally bake and take stuff to those people, so I'm getting other people that are still wheat eaters to taste my gluten-free, and then I don't have to have the calories in the house.
That's true.
Because I make these very, very evil brownies made with Nutella. And Nutella is delicious, but it is not healthy. And I don't know.
And it contains hydrogenated fat, by the way.
Yes. And there was a commercial in America over this last year saying that Nutella on whole wheat toast with orange juice was healthy for breakfast. And this woman then sued Nutella because she believed them saying it was healthy. And I was saying this at one of my talks last week. Yeah, Nutella's delicious, but we know it's not healthy. And I make brownies out of it, but it makes 12 minis, and that's all I want in the house. It's too dangerous. But you can make homemade Nutella yourself. That you can do.
Yes, you can. That's very, very simple.
It's still not healthy. It's delicious, but it's still not healthy. So that's why you only have 12 minis in the house, and you share the calories.
It's really, Nutella is basically a chocolate sauce with hazelnut paste in it. It's really that simple. So you melt your chocolate, you mix it in the hazelnut paste, and that's it. You have your homemade Nutella.
Yeah.
But people
don't know how to do it. They just do not know. They are scaringly ignorant of how to cook. I mean, I don't, if I said earlier, people say what I call everyday food is everyone else would call gourmet. But my husband, when we lived in England, used to say you could see his colleagues at work. They thought they would have canned vegetables during the week and frozen at weekends, whereas we were always fresh vegetables. I mean, the only canned we have is tomatoes and beans, because what else do you do half the time? But it's fresh vegetables the whole time. I was going to show off, since you have so many people that vegan as well follow you, that last night I made a black bean and sweet potato chili soup, stew, whatever you want to call it, with spinach in it and mushrooms as well. But I also then made garlic monkey bread that was gluten-free. Tonight I'm going to do tuna with an apple and ginger and coconut milk sauce, but over spaghetti squash. So, you know, you're looking at all these different vegetables and going from a totally vegetarian meal to fish or whatever. And, you know, I hear people saying they'll eat the same food day in, day out for 2 weeks. I'm thinking, well, not just boring, but what's that doing to your body, just being that lack of variety for your system? You must be missing out on stuff, especially if it's been sitting for 2 weeks.
We need to also keep in mind that not everyone had the luck or the opportunity to grow through careers like we did. So it's easy for I guess it's easy for us to rant and rave, but we have to keep in mind that when you grow up in this society, the whole system, the whole marketing environment is designed to prevent you from cooking.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Except for what they call the foodies, who then do all the exotic, extravagant stuff, as opposed to teaching people how to do ordinary, everyday food that's healthy and quick to make. I mean, my recipes, when I write them, and again, where we're both classically trained, I'll look at some recipes and think, there's no way these people are trained, because the recipe is so badly written. And I will say things like, you just throw it all in the pan and that's it, and there's no need to wash something because you're going to be reusing it. And you know, doing an ordinary, what Americans call gold cake and we call the Victoria sandwich, you know, you just can beat it all together now that the butter's soft and you've got the electric mixer. You don't need to do all these multiple steps. And people just don't know how to make good food. But you can make easy food cheaply.
Yes.
You know? I mean, as long as you know what to buy and get taught the basics of how to cook. And
you know, I always tell people that, you know, because people assume because I'm a French chef that I could cook this extravagant meal at home, and say, no, cooking is my job. When I get home, I don't want to work anymore. I keep my food extremely simple. It's fresh, it's healthy, you know, it's organic, it's grass-fed and everything, but it's very simple. But simple doesn't mean tasteless, you know, out of a can or defrosted. It's just you can steam any vegetables in about 5 minutes. You can broil any kind of meat in a few minutes. You don't have to do. Or if you want to go a little fancier, you can use a crock pot and make a stew, a soup, and you can walk away, and you don't have to stand in the kitchen for an hour, which is what a lot of people seem to think, that good cooking means spending a lot of time in the kitchen. As far as I'm concerned, if it takes more than 10-15 minutes to prepare, I'm not doing it.
No, but that's also the foolish thing. I had students that they weren't prepared just for the 10 to 15 minutes prep and put it in the oven to cook or the slow cooker. They wanted to prep it and eat it in 10 to 15 minutes, you know, and that's not always going to happen. But it's little things that we know as chefs. I mean, over here, certainly they cut the boneless chicken breast as scallops. And people will say to me, well, how come they do it that way? Well, they want it to cook as quickly as possible in a pan. But if you pound the chicken breast between saran wrap, it's just as thin. You're cooking it as quickly. And by pounding it, you've broken the fibers so they don't shorten and tighten when you pan cook them. But also the difference is, I'm sure you still follow it, and I certainly follow the French way. We're not eating a pound of meat at a time.
No.
You know, we will have an 8-ounce boneless chicken breast between us. We'll have the 7-ounce salmon steak between us. It's the flavoring aspect. You don't need to pig out on meat. I'm one of those that could never be vegetarian. I do need the meat. Well, no, it's not just because I enjoy being a carnivore, but my body needs the real meat. Cheese and beans doesn't cut it for me.
No, not
but
at all.
you don't need that huge quantity of meat and the price of it, let alone the cholesterol. You start adding in more vegetables and less meat, your cholesterol numbers go down naturally. And you can still have your butter and cream if you want them. And it just goes down naturally because you're eating less of the meats, which I discovered in this last year.
When I go to my butcher or fishmonger, I don't have to tell them anymore. They know exactly that my size is 4 ounces.
Yes.
Whatever
Exactly.
whatever I'm buying has to be 4 ounce and no more.
Yes.
A single servings, and then 4 ounce no more, and that's how I get it, packaged and
Yes.
ready to cook.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just take out the portion, boom, and either pan fry it or boil it or whatever the cooking method I use, and I add a nice salad or some nice vegetables on the side. That's it. I have a meal in what, 10 minutes.
Yes, but it's not only because we know what we're doing, but also because we're not pigging out.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
I mean, the people that have these huge portions. I know I was doing personal chef service years ago, and the wife was taking the chicken masala into work the next day because it was an ample portion. The husband was complaining he didn't have enough. Yeah, well, what size was the husband?
Yeah.
I keep saying it's not fair. There's no justice in the world. My husband and son are both slim. It is not right. But then I am also, with the gluten-free, it's the baking I do so much for people because they want to be taught how to make good gluten-free baking. But people also say the knowledge in my brain, I don't turn out half a dozen loaves for someone. It's the knowledge with Skype and the rest to say, well, no, this is what you do and you've got to watch out for this. Because I did say I've written the recipes for the National Foundation for Celiac Awareness, but we have a support group in Boston that's the biggest support group in the country for celiac disease, and they have a magazine now. One of the articles I wrote for them was cross-contamination in the kitchen and the little things that people don't know. And that's what's scary with stuff like gluten-free or with any of the food allergies, unless you've got a doctor or a nutritionist that's following the same lifestyle, food allergy, and we won't say diet, it's a way of living you have no choice about. Unless they're doing it as well, they really are not knowledgeable on how they can help you. They can say, oh, you're deficient in A through Z, go and eat kale or broccoli or whatever. But they can't tell you how to cook it so the kids will eat it. They can't tell you what brand names are good and safe and tasty. So that's what people tell me the whole time, that I, like you, do the food and I know the food. And I will come back and put on Facebook, this is what I bought in Trader Joe's this week. This is what I bought in Costco's. This is what's on sale. Yes, I tried the packet mix or, the prepared thing, and it was good. Or no, I wouldn't buy it again. But I also look on it. I'm going to taste stuff on sale at a decent price and say, nah, it's awful. It really is. And you look at all the ingredients. Who wants all those chemicals and preservatives in your body? They give you a shelf life of infinity, and what's it doing to you?
Well, you would hope that with all these preservatives, we would live longer, right?
Well, have you heard that they're saying this generation of children are going to live less time because of all the chemicals and preservatives?
Really?
They are more sick. When I was still working, I was working with people half my age that were constantly at the doctor, constantly sick, taking time off and all that. I worked there, and the last job that I held, I worked there for 7 years. I never took one sick day, not one. And they look at me like I'm some kind of a, how do you do it? And I say, well, it's simple. You just take care of your body, you eat healthy, you sleep, you take care of yourself. You can't, some people treat their car better than they treat their own body, They will go and do maintenance and change oil and do all of that, and people will abuse their body for 20 and 30 years, and then they wonder why they get sick.
Yes. Well, it's even before
simple.
The 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
I mean, when we go in for our physicals, they'll say, what meds are you on? And we say, none.
Yeah.
I mean, we have seasonal allergy meds because that's New Hampshire. You can't escape it. But basically, if I phone the doctor up for something, she knows it's because it's something I need. And she's not going to just tell me something because she knows I'm not taking meds. My body doesn't like them.
No.
Right.
I mean, it's real food makes a world of difference to your body. I've had a girlfriend, she's had knee surgery. And I'm saying, would you try going gluten-free? Because my reaction is arthritis, and that's very common with gluten, that arthritis, joint pains is the problem. And as I say, I had a very bad ski accident in my 20s where I fractured a vertebra in my back, put my pelvis out of alignment and pulled the ligaments in my knees. So I had pain after that, all my life. I went gluten-free. Basically, that pain went away. and my sign of contamination is arthritis. And I said to her, would you try going gluten-free to see if it helps the pain in your knees? Oh, no, I couldn't give up my bread. So you're willing to go in for major knee replacement surgery, all the rehab, physical therapy, everything, probably have to replace it in 15 years' time rather than trying to go gluten-free? I mean, people know I go on about it, but I'll say to someone when they have symptoms that I know can be gluten-free, or sorry, caused by gluten, because there's like 300 disorders caused by gluten. And I'll say to them, you know, why don't you try it? And they'll say, well, how do I do it? And I say, well, if you like a bagel, this is what you can do instead of a bagel. I said, it's not a real bagel, but that's what you like. This is what you do for a wrap. This is the brand of stock you buy. This is what I use as a thickener, and all these things. And I've got 4 friends that are diabetic. When they are strictly gluten-free, their numbers are fabulous. When they cheat, their numbers go bad. I have someone I know with multiple sclerosis. She emailed me within a week. Now, could it have been multiple sclerosis remission? I don't know. That's very coincidental that within a week of doing a gluten-free diet, she felt better. You know, and doctors don't know that. They think gluten and too many of these other allergies, they think it's stomach. But we know that sugar causes all these brain problems. Too many are saying that Alzheimer's and autism are caused by gluten and all these other ones. And it's scary what they don't know.
Have you heard of Dr. Walls?
W-A-H-L?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
Dr. Walls, W-A-H-L, yes. And she was on the show a few weeks ago, and she healed herself from, was it second grade MS, right?
The worst one you can get, basically.
Yeah, basically being, moving around in an electric wheelchair to complete remission.
Sort of 3 years in a wheelchair, wasn't she? Or something? Yes.
And she did it all through a paleo diet.
In under 9 months.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And that's what's scary, that doctors, Massachusetts, Boston has 3 of the top hospitals in the country which are celiac. And when I was presenting at their conference in April, and these 3 doctors were there as well, they were freely admitting that doctors know basically nothing about celiac disease, that most people have self-diagnosed in the first place, and that you've only got to look at what was written 5 and 10 years ago by doctors. They're now changing their tune so much and saying, oh no, we were wrong then. But, you know, we have to prove it to you. No. I mean, one of the doctors, a naturopath that was presenting with me last week, Dr. Stephen Wengen, I mentioned him in my cookbook because he says what I say to people: go with your gut. If you feel better going gluten-free or whatever it is you've given up and you feel better, why do you need a doctor to put you through misery and expensive tests to prove it to his satisfaction? I mean, quite honestly as well, with the way insurance was in the past, isn't it better not to have anything like that written on your insurance coverage? And you're better putting the money into healthy food than into prescriptions and medical bills.
I mean, how much would $1,000 buy of decent food?
Right. I mean, I had surgery last year, and we have fabulous health insurance. The bill was $40,000. You know, that was female surgery, very normal hysterectomy surgery. $40,000, of which I paid $250.
Which is the American way, right? You get the same surgery in Europe for about 1/10 of the cost, right?
Oh, easily.
It's covered by insurance. And it's the same with the endoscopy to prove your stomach thing, or the colonoscopy to prove something. And all these doctors are saying irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's, all this stuff. It all comes down to the food messing up your body. And if they would realize that sooner and be honest. I don't know if you two have heard the statistic that it's 10 years to be diagnosed with a gluten problem in America, 1 year in Europe, and some of the northern Scandinavian countries actually do tests at birth to see if you're gluten intolerant, any gluten problem. And that's criminal. And we know, because you can, as such, cure celiac disease or non-celiac gluten sensitivity with a diet. That's why the pharmacists are doing nothing. The pharmaceutical companies, should I say, because they're not making money out of a tablet. But there's enough people out there still want a tablet to take for everything.
That's because they don't want to give up something.
No.
you know.
Have you looked when they do the commercials? I don't know what sort you get in France, but over here, all the medical commercials for all these tablets, they don't tend to tell you what it's for, but they say all these horrible side effects. And I'm thinking, I prefer to know this stomachache is because I ate some wheat, not because I've taken these drugs.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, people do need to take responsibility for their own health and not just pop a pill that does nothing for them.
Yeah, a common complaint I get from some of my clients is that, well, eating healthy is so expensive. And I said, have you costed cancer lately?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But again, I can't
it.
believe that. You know, I mean, the other day we were sat down and I was actually looking at what I had on the plate and I said, do you realise this cost us less than 40 cents each?
Yeah.
You know, so
wow.
You know,
I was going to say, what did you make that was that cheap?
It was my famous minced pork. I mean, I sort of tend to mince one day and it lasts normally for at least 2 or 3 meals.
Yes.
There was minced pork with a bit of apple mixed in to make some. I either make sausages with it or patties. This time it was patties, you know, onion and so forth. A bit of salad, a bit of beetroot. What else did we have? I think that was probably it for the meal. But we both went away satisfied.
Oh yeah, now you must grow your own veg though, because you couldn't do that for 80 cents in America.
No, that's, you know, the meat was from, you know, the local supplier. The beetroot was the same. So it's all standard prices, you know, nothing cheap there. It's just that because I do all the cooking, I can mentally plan the meals ahead.
Yes. Yeah.
So, you know, what's not used in one meal gets used in the next meal.
Yeah. Which is what I do, but Americans, too many of them say, "Oh, that's leftovers." And I like to call it a planned leftover.
Yeah.
I'll say, you know, cook your chicken or pork on the grill, then you've got the leftover chicken or pork to go into these salads to top stuff or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
But too many think it's leftovers. Not if you planned it. If you intended to do it that way. If you want to do something fresh every day, you take over doing the cooking. I'm not spending that time doing it, you know. And I mean, I'm again genetically incapable of making a batch of soup that's just 2 portions for one night. You know, I mean, you're making half a stock pot full of soup and having it for lunch for several days and putting more in the freezer for the day you haven't got time. Yeah. You know, and that's what you do. And that's how it gets cheaper as well when you've got stuff. Yeah, I mean, we love beets. I love doing a salad, a goat's cheese panna cotta with the fresh cooked beets. Oh, I love that. Yes.
Okay. Let's go back to you now. It looks like you travel a lot to teach people about gluten-free cooking and baking. Can you tell us where you've been recently? Where you're going next?
Let's think. Going back, I was at the Boston Celiac Conference in April, and I've done that multiple years with. That was with baking because it was Passover, Easter. So I did my almond cake. Regularly almond cake, but then I made it baking powder and alcohol free because of the Jewish side for Passover. Then I did a flourless chocolate cake, but again I did baking powder and all the rest of it free for Passover. Then in May I was in Atlanta for the 40th annual Gluten Intolerance Group conference. I was speaking there on the power of food, best medicine, the worst poison, as I said, the GMO, the trans fats and all the rest of it. I do an awful lot of that for corporate lunch and learns because people know I know food. I tend to step back in the summer because it's my time for getting things redone. It didn't happen this year. I spoke at the Boston Green Fest, which that was sponsored by Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. And then I was on Pamela's Products booth talking about the gluten-free there. Then I was at the Boston Local Food Festival, which was a huge festival down in Boston on a professional kitchen stage. And I made a summer quinoa tabbouleh. So I make my tabbouleh with quinoa, but with tomatoes and cucumber and a fresh herb vinaigrette. So I was making that on the professional stage. September, I flew to Dallas and was with the Dallas-Fort Worth Gluten Intolerance Group. I did a morning demo. You forget words sometimes. I had my cornbread that I make from scratch, and I make it with egg substitutes, so you're not getting the egg yolk, olive oil, and either lactose-free milk or almond milk. and as a daily basis, and I made it into my sausage and apple and sage stuffing. And then I made crab stuffed mushrooms. And then in the afternoon, I did a private Asian style cooking class with cashew nut hummus and the Asian spring rolls with all the herbs and veg in. And then I did something called Shanghai noodles, which is a barbecue spicy ground bison, in fact, bison or buffalo we had with noodles. And then coconut milk panna cotta. So that was gluten-free, dairy-free and egg-free. And then I was at a muscular dystrophy walk talking to people. And then last week I was in Springfield, Mass at one of the allergy expos talking on the power of food. I fly to Dallas in a week's time to be at the expo there doing the power of food. I'm at someone else in December. I'm on our local ABC station in a week's time, and I'll be doing a very evil pumpkin cheesecake mousse for Thanksgiving. You know, you totally lose track. And I've got to get an article off this week for the Boston Celiac Support Group. They have a quarterly magazine that's glossy that I do various stuff for them in that. I'm also next week in a health fair for a big corporate, technical corporate in Massachusetts, where they invite me to come back and talk about food and bring samples of I'll be doing a quinoa soup with all the vegetables in it, and I use coconut milk and peanut butter or nut butter. So I do those as outside things. I've been asked to talk at an awful lot more conferences. I am not spending out the money to fly to California and North Dakota and Oregon or Florida. So I want corporate companies, you know, the big food companies, to sponsor me to go there. And it's the companies I know, like Jones Dairy Farm and Pamela's Products and Udi's, the people I know are responsible and respectable food people. I don't want people that I know nothing about. I actually met Claudia again from Hail Mary last week. Do you know Claudia? Right. Yes, I met her at the conference again last week. I met her when she was in Boston with her cousin. So I do a whole selection of things. I do this sort of Skype to help people. They want the motivation, not the motivation, the support, the emotional support of dealing gluten-free. I mean, one of my articles said, yeah, you've just been diagnosed gluten-free, celiac disease, whatever the food allergy problem is, and you're glad to know what's caused the problem for so many years, but you're thinking, well, what the hell do I do next? Because they'll give you a list and say, stop eating gluten. Yeah, well, we know where gluten's hidden in everything.
Yeah.
And if you're just going to go process food, your body's not going to heal with junk food. It needs real good food to help you heal.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So I will do private cooking classes for a group of people, or I'll do a large cooking class, or go into corporate, because like you, Alain, they know I know food. And I tell people, okay, this is where you buy the good food at the good price. I'm not telling you, yes, you say organic, grass-fed. Well, lots of people can't afford that. So you have to say to them, well, again, money into food or money into prescriptions, and, you know, do you need all this junk food in your body? And I normally say, you know, kids can't cope with all this junk food. Their bodies are even more fragile. You've got to take more care with them. I'm sure you two aren't aware of this in the slightest, but if you look at those packets of instant oatmeal for a start is chemically processed. It's not just chopped, it's chemically processed. The equivalent of 4 teaspoons of sugar in a single sachet of instant oatmeal. What is that doing for kids for going to school? 4 teaspoons of sugar in breakfast. You know, I mean, I grew up on eggs for breakfast.
Yeah, then they wonder why the kids are ADD, ADHD, don't pay attention in school, because they after 2 hours after breakfast, they crash and they can't focus.
And they just think ADHD and all the rest, that they want to blame it on everything rather than you're putting junk food into your kids' bodies. What do you expect? You know?
Yeah.
And I mean, I say in my write-up, don't take away my chocolate and cheese. I will say that, you know, because people think when we rant and rave that we're talking some weird and wonderful fad or trend or something like that. No, we're basically talking real food again. And that's what people need to understand. Real food. That's the world of different.
The big issue I have with this whole issue of ADD, ADHD is that once the kid is being called that, then they put them on very toxic drugs, psychotropic drugs, when the solution is food. The solution is food. It's that simple. But we live in such a society that is so pharmaceutically enhanced that everything has an answer in a pill, when we should look at the food, at the diet.
Exactly.
And
yes,
that's what I'm trying to do. But it's very
yes.
frustrating when you're not being heard by the parents themselves.
Well, they are, I hate saying they are ignorant, but they are ignorant, and they want to believe doctors rather than doing their own research. I mean, my son's roughly the same age as your son, and first grade, when he was going to Catholic school, which felt like English elementary to me, that's why I put him in there and knew that education was so important for them. There was a boy there that public school, and you know, in America, public school means state school. It doesn't mean Eton and Harrow.
Yeah.
Public school wanted to put him on Ritalin for ADHD. He went to Catholic school, and the routine and discipline of Catholic school, yes, a first grade little boy is very active anyway. You know, I mean, for heaven's sake, 7-year-old little boy, get him to sit still for any length of time. But the discipline of Catholic school, I mean, that kid went through 12 years of Catholic school. He was one of the kids that went down to Washington and did all the state, every state sent kids to Washington, good degree and everything, because the discipline of Catholic school, his mother was a nurse, he was on real food, made the difference. I mean, our pediatrician, we were lucky we had the same pediatrician until my son aged out at 21. She always said he was so healthy, even with asthma, which I now think the asthma was celiac disease from when he was tiny. He was so healthy because he had real food the whole time. He wasn't having the packet mix. He wasn't having the soda. It was real food, make a difference to your body. And that's it. People just do not realize it. So yeah, I start ranting and raving, but you get through to the young mothers, they say, yeah, this is making sense. And she's telling me how to cook everyday easy foods for the kids. I mean, I even made baby food for my son when he was little. We didn't buy the jars of stuff. And it's easy. Yes, you need to plan, but you tell people how to plan and how you do it, you know, and that junk into their bodies, and the cost of buying whoever makes the foods, be they fresh processed or frozen processed, it costs a fortune. And you look at all, I normally say, if you read an ingredient list and with a normal high school education, you don't know what it is or can't pronounce it, assuming that they know things like thiamine and niacin are vitamins, you shouldn't be putting that stuff in your body.
No.
And yeah, it's criminal. It's real. I just keep going on about it being criminal, and it is.
So it sounds to me you're a very, very busy lady, and you're high demand everywhere. Do I get it right? Did you write a cookbook as well?
Yes, I've written a cookbook. It's called Delicious Gluten-Free Cooking. It's on a disc, so you either get it physically mailed to you as a disc or you download it, because it's over 200 pages. It's full color photos throughout. My husband does the professional photos. He also filmed my shows that are on YouTube or on community television and were award-winning. But they wanted to charge me $50 to print it. Not for me to sell it, for them to print it. Because with all the color photos, the whole book counted as glossy. I'm thinking, no, I don't think so. No. Plus, you know as well as I do, the amount of food editors out there that do not know what they're doing when they edit. I'm not having them messing around with my recipes and my information. So I just do it as a disc, and you can get it either through me on Facebook at Gluten Free Cooking with Oonagh, or on email me. And the email is not the one that I normally do with you. It's cookingwithoonagh@yahoo.com. You have the Oonagh at royaltemptations.com. Unfortunately, with the word temptations in my email address, people think it's something to be pornographic. So corporate and all these don't like that any more than they like you looking up breast cancer, because it has that rude word breast in it. I tend to tell people cooking with Oonagh at Yahoo, if it's going to be someone whose website or email address might kick it back.
I watched your one of your videos on YouTube, and I watched the one with the gluten-free pizza with cheese, roasted butternut, candied pecans. Sounds wonderful. Can you ship us one?
Well, you know, if you do a gluten-free expo in Austin, I can come to Austin then, because next week is Dallas, not Austin. The one I do is Stonewall Kitchens do a roasted onion and garlic jam. So I put that on the pizza with brie. Oh, that's heavenly. Or do it
that sounds like a pissaladière. Sounds like a pissaladière, you know, the French onion tart.
Yeah, but normally doesn't that have anchovies on it?
Yes, it
Yeah,
would do.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it has
You know,
anchovies, yeah. But oh
right.
yeah, it's so wonderful. It really is. I'm going to do one this weekend with roasted butternut squash and some roasted shallots and do it that way.
Yeah.
Oh.
I,
I make very good gluten-free pizza. I've done it for parties, and the wheat eaters have been stealing my gluten-free pizza in preference
Okay.
to the bought-in stuff. Oh yeah, yeah. When I do neighborhood parties, all I get asked is that an Oonagh dessert? That's all they ask. You know, we go to friends for Christmas, and they have in New Hampshire we have what's called the Big Lake, Winnipesaukee, where a lot of people have family homes, and they go up in the summer, and that's the only place you can get a genuine lemon meringue pie from scratch. Because we all know that too many lemon meringue pies, the lemon meringue filling comes in the plastic bag, and you can taste it's synthetic. So I have to make real lemon meringue pie for Christmas for everyone else that's wheat eaters, and they eat it with no problem. Because it's only the crust that's different anyway.
Yeah.
You know, real stuff is
speaking
actually gluten-free.
speaking of pizza, I have a technical question for you.
Yes.
What is the proper way to say tomato? Tomato or tomato?
Tomato. We say tomato, they say tomato. Potato,
Okay.
potato. You know,
So
oh yes. I normally
it's
say
two
everyone else has the accent, not me.
it's two against one. It's Mark and you against me. So you say tomato and I say tomato.
Well, it's our language, isn't it, after all, before Americans adulterated it.
Just get me edited scissors out.
Yeah, it gets to be that having lived here so long, I have to stop and remember what's the English word and what's the American word, and it gets so confusing sometimes. It really, really does, you know. But yeah, at least I can pronounce the French correctly for you. I do hate
Good.
it when people say they can't pronounce Boeuf Bourguignon properly, and I think, oh, you know, and cassoulet and all the rest, they just do not know. And I make a good cassoulet as well, but I make it with a millet crust. And you know,
Yeah.
it's really instead of the breadcrumbs. Yeah, I
On
enjoy food.
On the serious side, there's a lot of talk. There's a backlash now against the gluten-free diet. You know, a lot of people now saying, "Well, it's only a fad." Well, what's your take on that?
I had someone a year ago asked me, he wanted me to go up to one of the hotels in the mountains and do a gluten-free Thanksgiving for people coming in. And he was calling it the latest craze in capitals. And I went back really quite nasty to him. And as you say, there's so many people saying it's the latest fad, it's the latest trend, and people will stop following it once the next trend comes in. And statistically, it's something like 1% to 2% need to follow medically a gluten-free diet, but 18% of the country are following a gluten-free diet because the media and Hollywood have hyped it so much as being healthy and you can lose weight and it's this, that, and the other. But only, I think, last week, Canada, the government said all this processed gluten-free food, in fact, they're not saying it's healthy. It's not meeting the criteria they set for food that's healthy, because it has more fat and sugar and sodium than the wheat equivalent. And so Canadian government is saying, no, this stuff is not healthy.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people that truly have no choice but to buy gluten-free, they have to buy this stuff that basically is worse for your body than the wheat equivalent, but they've got their junk food fix or their carb fix that they want, and they just want to keep filling up on the carbs, you know. And I mean,
let me just be clear there then. So what they're saying is not the gluten-free lifestyle isn't healthy, it's the gluten-free convenience foods that aren't healthy.
The processed foods out in the market is not healthy.
Yeah, and I wouldn't disagree with that. I had the same argument when Atkins came out with their garbage.
Yes, yes. I mean, I tried the South Beach diet some years ago because I know, as I said, I'm someone that truly needs protein. And I was following it, and I was feeling worse and worse on a daily basis. Until I reread the book, and there was this tiny line slipped in, some people still need their vegetables. And when I added back in vegetables, I was feeling so much better. And I mean, basically, I do the Julia Child thing. You know, it should be moderation, follow the balanced diet, a bit of everything. Do that 80-20, 80% healthy, you know, the 20% cheating, or not cheating, but the indulging, as we said, the desserts at weekends. I mean, my son never had the junk food. We never grew up on the junk food. We don't have the junk food now. My husband, when he travels, I'm looking forward to cooking something extravagant. When he comes home, he wants just ordinary shepherd's pie or something like that, because he just wants the traditional ordinary food. I mean, yes, I can make totally, both of us can make totally extravagant, indulgent, fabulous foods. I even make a gluten-free gâteau Saint-Honoré. You know, and I remember making that for my brother's 21st birthday on a 16-inch plate. That's how big I made it for him with everyone. But it's real food is the difference. And the processed gluten-free is a junk. It's so bad for your body. You look at the chemicals and preservatives in it. It can't be healthy putting them in your body. You're better just to shop the outside of the store of the real food. Learn how to make a few gluten-free breads or rolls, particularly since the price of gluten-free bread, it's $6 for a thing that's the size of 2 rolls. Why would you pay that sort of, $6 for a gluten-free loaf if you're lucky. $6. You know, I paid $6 for 2 mini croissants that were gluten-free the other week, and those are the ones I said were awful. $6.
It's ridiculous. Gluten-free junk food is still junk food, so
exactly. Junk food is junk food, whoever it is. Junk food in, junk body out. You know, remember, my numbers are good, even though I'm not slim. My numbers are good, remember?
We're seeing a trend of more and more food allergies. And so do you think that the gluten-free diet is here to stay? Because possibly, I'm not saying for sure because it hasn't been proven again, but my feeling is that genetically engineered food has a lot to do with all the leaky gut syndromes and all the digestive issues we're having increasingly. I'm afraid that the gluten-free or the celiac trend is going to get worse with time.
If we ignore the word trend and talk about people genuinely needing a gluten-free diet, I think more and more people are going to finally realize they can't cope with gluten, whether it's the non-celiac gluten sensitivity or true celiac disease, finally figuring out what it is. Because unfortunately, the modern wheat nowadays is what our body is not designed to digest. And also, you know, you expect wheat, and we know that gluten is rye and barley, but, you know, wheat's the word everyone recognizes. You expect wheat in your pasta, your bread, your rolls, your pastry. You do not expect to see wheat in your makeup, your body cream, your toothpaste. I even bought a jar of Hero Jam, you know, which is one of the European brands like Bon Maman. I would easily buy here. Hero Jam had wheat in it. What is wheat doing in jam? It should be fruit and sugar and perhaps lemon, and that's it. Wheat in it. I'm one of those, and the doctors will tell you can only get the gluten reaction by something going in your mouth. With all the talks I give of myself personally, I know those body creams and shampoos that put the wheat germ in it, that also does my arthritis in my hands. The problem also is with true food allergies. I think more and more people are developing more and more food allergies because of all the chemicals and preservatives and all the junk that's done to everything. It's bombarding our body with all this stuff, which we can't cope with. I certainly know both from myself and again talking to people and clients, we are developing, once you do have celiac disease, and I'd also perhaps guess non-celiac gluten sensitivity, once you've started with one food allergy, you're more likely to develop more because you become so oversensitive to everything. I discovered the other week, my girlfriend had made a gluten-free banana bread the other week that I had, and I felt awful after it. I thought it was the soybean flour she used because I use so little soy. You know, it's in that spray food spray and perhaps in bought mayonnaise. I don't willingly choose to use soy. I don't care for it for my body. But I thought, oh, it's the soy flour, that's why I felt awful. I made my own banana cake the other week. I felt awful again. I then discovered by reading that Dr. Stephen Wengen's book again, and a cousin with multiple food allergies, I can't tolerate bananas. Who would have thought? And this cousin that has 20 food allergies, including celiac disease, she can't tolerate bananas. Now, I also thought I had been unlucky with mussels. I used to get food poisoning symptoms whenever I had mussels. And we know mussels are dirty feeders and people can get sick. And yes, I could have one bad one and my husband not a bad one. I then discovered a different cousin. She gets the same symptoms as me with mussels. My aunt on the other side of the family with shellfish would start acting as if she was drunk and bright red face.
Yeah.
So again, it's some form of reaction to these different foods. And more people are getting more and more reactions to more and more foods because there's more and more pesticides out there. When people go on about organic being wonderful, I'm saying, you've got to realize organic doesn't mean pesticide free. Organic means non-GMO. There are still pesticides, there are still fertilizers. They're just basically not created in laboratory. They're kitchen sink, they're natural. But things like digitalis is still a poison. You know, it's natural, but it's still a poison. And people think organic means, oh, this is wonderful. No, it still can be poisonous. Well, not poisonous, we'll say toxic. But they don't realize this, and we're getting reactions to all these different things. And you've only got to look at the chemicals in all that food and the sprays out there. Why are you buying that spray to wash your vegetables with? What's that doing to your body that you've washed these vegetables with? You know, I don't know about you, but at culinary school, we had to wash our carrots before we peeled our carrots, and then we had to wash them again, didn't we? You know, that's how we were taught growing up, or not growing up, culinary school.
So keeping all that in mind. Keeping all of this in mind. What's your impression on the paleo lifestyle and the paleo way of living? Because that takes all the grains out.
I think if you're finding a reaction to them, fine, go with it. But you know, I like my quinoa grain. You know, I love my quinoa. I have no problems personally with a load of grains. And when you start looking at what they say is the paleo diet, the pros and cons of it, and the people saying it's based on this philosophy that, you know, we weren't hunter-gatherers and this food wasn't available then. And then other people saying, well, it depends what part of the universe you grew up in, because different foods were in different countries, which we all know. My basic thing is, you know, be sensible about what you're putting into your body. You know, I'll say that dairy, people react more to dairy than to gluten. And I know we've got friends that say, have a piece of cheesecake. If you start getting stomach cramps or reactions, it's obviously you're dairy intolerant. They told my son he was lactose intolerant. He actually is dairy intolerant. I have a degree of lactose intolerance. I don't want to give up. I couldn't give up my cheese, could you? And he obviously likes the brie, you know. But, you know, if your body's sending you signals that you're not happy, then you either give it up and your body's healthier and happier, or you continue to be in pain. You know?
Hard choice.
People have allergies to, people have allergies to so many different things. My brother had allergies to strawberries as a child. He came up in hives everywhere from strawberries. You know, I have the mussels. Avocado, some people can't react to, can't cope with. Someone said to me the other week they're allergic to quinoa. And I said, well, in what way are you allergic? Because quinoa is very high fiber, and because of it can be a laxative effect on some people that aren't used to high fiber foods. And they start saying their reaction. I'm saying, yeah, I don't think that's a reaction to quinoa. That's a reaction to the fiber of quinoa. And they just don't realize that they blame their body reacting to the simplest things sometimes. Not, you drink 6 beers, you're going to have a lot of a reaction. And it's not the grain in the beer, it's because that's the amount of alcohol you're putting into your body. Yeah,
like I sniff the cork, I have a reaction.
Well, you know, gone are the days that at university we could drink like a fish all night and sleep wonderfully and wake up without a hangover. You can't do it to our bodies any longer as we've aged. My husband and I find after 8 o'clock at night, we can't have our glass of wine, we can't have fruit, we can't have anything sugar, dessert or anything, because we don't sleep. The sugar at that hour of the night stops us sleeping. So at weekends, I'll make dessert and we'll have it with my 4 o'clock cup of tea. So I can have my dessert. But we won't have it at dinner time because we can't cope with that level of sugar. You know, but look at the sugar. I mean, again, Mark mightn't know, did you see the uproar the other year when Twinkies were going out of business? And people were buying up Twinkies. Well, that's
and
one of those things.
They were paying ridiculous price on eBay. I mean, hundreds of dollars. I mean, how ridiculous can you be?
And it's totally fake. Shelf life of infinity, as I say. But they were desperate for it. And you know, I didn't buy any of that stuff in wheat flour days. I don't want to buy it now. You know, I virtually, let me think. I do cheat and buy gluten-free graham crackers and Oreos through sheer laziness, but I'm also realistic that that's what a lot of people will do. So I'll tell them what good brands are. I do buy, Pamela's products do their version of Fig Newtons, which I love. So I will have those. And they're fairly good, and their stuff is all organic and non-GMO and everything. And it's more real food than most out there. But yeah, I don't buy the gluten-free junk out there. It is junk.
It is junk,
you know, it is. You just look at the label and you know it's bad for you. And I mean truly bad for you, not just it's an indulgence and yeah, it's butter and sugar, so it's bad for you. This stuff is bad for you with chemicals and preservatives and trans fats and soy through the yin yang. You know, yeah, it's crazy. And soy in America is so messed around with compared to the soy that they make in China and Japan.
Oh gosh, yes, yeah.
Yeah,
it is, yeah.
And people think soy is wonderful. No, in America, soy is not wonderful. No. It really is.
Well, it's not only that. It's that soy, the way the American marketing has been done, they portray soy to be this wonderful food, but they say, well, all the Eastern country are eating soy and they are doing, you know, they're healthy and they're blah. What they forget to mention very conveniently is that most Asian use soy as a fermented food and only as a condiment. That is a very small portion, you know, to help digestion because of fermentation. They don't drink gallons of soy milk and they don't eat, you know, edamame on a regular basis. So again, we go back to the same issue as we talked before, is that whenever there's food concerned, the marketing power of this corporation is enormous. And this is what we're dealing with. You know, they'll do anything to sell their soy and they'll, you know, make any kind of lies. I mean,
do you mean they don't tell us the truth?
No, isn't that a shocker? Here we thought they told us the truth about everything. Yes. But you know what you're saying is true. The Asian side, the Asian countries, yes, their soy is fermented, but I was interestingly just reading something. The soy in Japan, etc., is created, cooked, whatever, very differently to what's done to it in America. She did say they eat far more of it than just the tiny condiment that you mentioned, but she said it's a very different product than what's in America. I had bought some Dedicated Bakery in Maine. I bought some of their gluten-free pastries there to try out and see what I thought and recreate, but they wouldn't tell me what the flours were. I didn't hear it until a girlfriend told me afterwards, no, it's soybean flour. I was in agony for about 3 days, not just from the effect of soybeans, but I don't get hot flashes. I've never had hot flashes. I had 3 days of hot flashes because of the estrogen in the soy. You know, there was an article in Men's Health magazine some years ago about a soldier, a Marine, widowed, taking care of himself and decided he was going to get healthy and soy milk like mad. He developed women's breasts. And no one knew what it was because no one asked him what you were eating for food. And that's the trouble, that, you don't drink gallons of soy milk and tofu. And I mean, I flatly say with my vegetarian classes, I do not do tofu. I don't like the stuff for a start, but no. You know, if you want to make something taste like meat, have meat. Don't start doing tofu and nutritious yeast and all this stuff to try and create meat. If you're missing meat that much, have meat. Stop being a hypocrite. Sorry. That's my feeling. Because they are.
So based on your comment on your Japanese friends, would you say that you and Mark are genuine British and I'm genuine French?
Yeah, I'd say so. We certainly set the world to rights and tell people what we think. And I mean, there's an awful lot of Americans believe in real food. Unfortunately, they're still the minority, and the FDA and food lobbyists and food manufacturers still turn out total junk and lie to people. I mean, you were talking about your organic grass-fed beef. One of the things I was saying in my Power Food talks is the amount of food recalls out there and how they can't discover where the meat came from. Well, in England, and I think in Europe, they know where every bit of meat comes from that goes into a slaughterhouse.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's criminal that they can't tell you where it comes from, and they're unwilling to tell you. And I was reading something, I loved it yesterday. The FDA complains, or public health FDA, you can't go and buy raw milk from a local farmer because it could be dangerous. But look at all this, the food recalls. I mean, I was at a trade show in Boston, and a private public health inspector, this was around the time that company, the peanut butter company, went out of business a few years ago because the factory was full of salmonella and E. coli, and public health had passed it as being okay, even though there was rodent droppings everywhere, and the company went out of business. This private public health guy said if he went in for the good food manufacturers and passed that place as being healthy, he'd have been sued. Literally, government public health can go in and pass it, and they don't even get a slap on the hand.
No.
And I know locally when I go into places that public health is meant to have passed, I'm thinking, you must be kidding. You know, public health, when I used to be licensed from my home, would say, he's preaching to the converted with me, because I know what I'm doing. And I'll go into places, and when I write write-ups on restaurants, not only do I say the food is good, I will turn around and say the bathrooms were spotless.
Yes.
Because as we all know, if that bathroom's spotless, it's fairly indicative of the cleanliness of the entire place.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But it's criminal, the food quality. It really is. You know.
Honestly, I am shocked because all this time I've been told only French people, opinionated people, but I'm saying that I'm saying that the English are opinionated as well, right?
Well, it makes you cross when, I'm sure Mark's heard this, and I'm sure you're going to say something. They say English food is so bad, England can't cook. And then my friends and clients will turn around and say, oh, you've got to taste Oonagh's food, you know, that's not it, you know. And there's bad cooks in America as well. And there's people that have supposedly done a culinary arts degree that shouldn't be allowed anywhere because they don't know what they're talking about. You'll love this one. The local television, as I say, featured chefs. They had this man on, and the presenter was asking him, what's the difference between herbs and spices? Because he was going on about herbs and spices. He said, I can tell you that one. My professor at school, culinary arts, told me herbs are fresh and spices are dried. Do you like that one? That's, you know, and there's a chain in New Hampshire that everyone thinks is wonderful food. Oh, we don't make our garlic butter with butter because it's not healthy for you. Da-dum. We make our garlic butter with margarine. Mark's eyes, yes. Yeah. They make their garlic butter with margarine because it's healthier for you than butter. Yeah.
Right. Well, obviously they're still 20 or 30 years behind.
Horror stories.
But people go and eat at those places the whole time because they know better.
But on the other side, on the positive side, I came to this country 35 years ago where the only fresh vegetables you could get was iceberg lettuce and tomatoes you can play baseball with.
Yes.
Now you have farmers market all over the place. You have good quality food available if you look for it.
Yes.
Granted, if you go to a regular grocery store, no, but if you have Whole Foods, you have all these great stores. You also have restaurants that make a point to cook local and fresh foods, grown and raised locally. So, to try to end on a nice and positive mode, there's been tremendous progress in this country when it comes to the quality of food.
There is. I mean, last weekend, I want to say we're miseries. It was Halloween Friday night, and I was not in the mood for all these kids ringing the doorbell and taking handfuls of chocolate, not saying thank you, and I didn't want the chocolate in the house anyway. So we went out to dinner to a local restaurant we like, that's an Italian restaurant, clearly does gluten-free. And Melanie, the waitress, she's going for her PhD, and she's a waitress, so we're not talking an idiot here. Incredibly bubbly. Every single dish she brought out, she was double checking with the chef and double checking with me each time that it was gluten-free. And we had an aubergine appetizer that came with crostini, and they had it totally separate and said, I'm turning it so the crostini's towards your husband. Oh, I see you brought your own bread with you. I mean, you couldn't ask for better than that. And then you go to other places and they think it's a fad, as you say, and ask you, we get asked, is it a medical preference, a medical necessity or a preference? Because too many idiots are asking for it and people then think it doesn't really matter. And they will, oh, it doesn't matter. Well, then that is bad for those of us with genuine food allergies, whether it's gluten or anything else. I mean, I don't know whether you two have heard it, but the stories of grandmothers that don't believe in anaphylactic reactions to peanut butter, and grandchildren can almost die and they won't listen to it. Or people that truly get bad reactions to anything and they don't believe in it. You know? I mean, I have got so much more sensitive in this last year since the hysterectomy that I'm having to be very, very careful because I'm getting allergic reactions to things like bee stings or anything like that. I'm getting welts, so I'm being told now, perhaps think about an EpiPen because I'm getting so oversensitive. And a lot of it is the cleaner the diet you follow, I think the more you react to, I won't say junk because I don't buy junk, but if you buy something that perhaps has pesticides in it that you don't know about, or you buy something that used to be okay and no longer is okay.
Yeah, no, that's very
true.
true.
And you start getting reaction.
Yeah.
I can tell when I'm going to a party and I don't want to make waves, although everybody knows my position on food. I try to be picky about the kind of food I'm, and yet the next day my digestive system is completely messed up.
Yeah, we had a neighborhood party Labor Day weekend. They were so good. They did the chicken and beef separately for me. You know, they knew the basics, but they still cooked it on the regular grill. And I get flu joint aches. That's what hits me. And I'm miserable for at least 2 days. I wrote on Facebook yesterday, I've been miserable for a week because the hotel we stayed at, I had one of those egg-type omelette things that came in commercially. And immediately my stomach hurt, immediately brain fog and tiredness. And it was because I actually ate stuff with gluten in it, not just contamination.
They put gluten in those commercially pre-made eggs and omelette dishes. I mean, really, how difficult it is to make an omelette.
I was going to say, why do you have to buy an omelette in? Why so bloody difficult?
Because they don't have staff that know what they're doing. One of the articles I wrote earlier this year was the restaurant chain, the hotel chain we stay at in Mexico, and where I've got so much more sensitive. I emailed them in advance and they set up for me to talk to the chefs and double check the food. And I asked him at breakfast, because we both know those plastic bags of the scrambled egg mix that has flour in, and that's how they do scrambled eggs. I asked him about the scrambled eggs, because you see them cooking it in front of you, but you don't see them necessarily breaking the eggs to do it. And he looked at me as if I had 2 eggs. Why would we put flour in our scrambled egg?
Exactly.
You know? And they were wonderful for me in Mexico. I had the same 2 chefs the whole time. It was the Iberostar chain, which is in fact a Spanish chain anyway. And fabulous food. We love it in Mexico with them. And we go back to the same place because in the middle of a New England winter with 10 feet of snow outside, to go to 90 degrees of sunshine and fresh vegetables and fruit the whole time, it's heaven. Absolutely died and gone to heaven because we love our fruit and veg, you know.
I have to make a comment on what you said earlier, because as a chef, I do take exception to this. We should rephrase the fact that the hotels or the restaurants do not have the qualified people to do a scrambled egg or an omelette. They will not hire qualified people, and they will not pay. They will not pay the right wages for qualified people to do. I mean, let's face it. We have thousands and thousands of graduates from culinary school coming out every week. They could afford to pay someone that knows how to make an omelette from scratch, but no, they pay.
They pay a housewife to come in and open a plastic bag.
They pay immigrants. I mean, you look at most hotels, you look in the kitchen, and it's mostly, unless it's a 5-star, a high-level restaurant or hotel, most of the employees are immigrants in the kitchen.
And they're not qualified. They have no food training whatsoever.
Because it's all about making profit, and so you hire the cheapest employee you can find, and then you make do with pre-made food, and
Yeah.
So all they have to do is pop it in the microwave and serve it. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a huge difference between the restaurants that know what they're doing and the ones that are totally oblivious. And I mean, I'm not talking the five-star restaurants. We have local little diners that know exactly what they're doing for gluten-free and will turn out fabulous food, safely gluten-free. And we're not talking expensive, but they know what they're doing. And that's it. They know and they care. I normally say they care enough to be caring.
Yeah.
And I will talk about the big companies like, say, Jones Dairy Farm, that's an ordinary meat supplier, but he's gone the step of certifying the stuff to be gluten-free. Well, I'm sorry. Meat and sausage should be gluten-free anyway. What have they put in it? I, like you, I make my homemade sausage patties. You know, I make them, I put my apple and my sage and I make a whole batch and I roast them and I throw them in the freezer and take them out. And when I travel, I make my equivalent to the Dunkin' Donuts breakfast bagel. When I take a flight, I have my egg and my sausage and everything for traveling because it keeps you going. But
you know that most commercial sausage or meat patties, they use wheat as a binder to keep it together. So that's why we end up with wheat in a meat product.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting. Butterball, which is Jennie-O turkeys, label it now gluten-free and tell you it's gluten-free and have it big writing saying gluten-free except for the gravy packet. And I'm sorry, Jennie-O to me I never thought was a top brand. You know, I don't know why, I just didn't think it was, because I grew up on fresh turkey from the farm anyway. You didn't buy anything but fresh. But you know, they go to the step of saying, yes, it is gluten-free. No, we haven't injected anything into the body to increase the weight and it contains gluten. And people don't realize this. They think they're buying raw chicken breast, but no, the good nutritionists in the bigger chains will tell you it's been injected with a solution containing wheat.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same as I said, that jam containing wheat. And unfortunately, the FDA food labeling for gluten-free 12 months ago that came out this August, it's made stuff more difficult. The big companies no longer label anything. You can't even get straight answers on the website.
No.
You know, and why is wheat the only thing down as one of the top 8 allergens? Why is it not gluten like the rest of the world? You know?
Right.
So, yeah. And it's the same for every food allergy.
So in your opinion, the new FDA standards are not adequate?
For the gluten-free labeling, I am disgusted with them. And again, it's just the lobbyists talking to the FDA. And the ordinary FDA nutritional labeling is something I talk about because, as we all know, I mean, the one that sticks in my mind, they call a normal serving of soda 8 ounces. I have never seen anything less than a 12-ounce soda bottle. Most people buy the litre and go beyond it to 64 ounces. Well, if you think you're taking in 100 calories, say, for 8 ounces, and you're taking in 8 times that, you know, and it's the same with sugar. The FDA allowed the sugar industry to, instead of sugar as sugar on ingredients list, so you know if you looked at an ingredient list and sugar was the first item, you knew it was heavy on sugar. The FDA now allows them to rename sugar into every single component they can dream up and scatter it throughout the ingredient list. So it's only if you look at the gram dosages, and we know Americans don't understand grams, they don't realize how much sugar's in something, you know? And this is just letting them get away with nonsense. I read something today that there was 56, was it on your site or somewhere, 56 different names for sugar. Now I knew like a dozen and list a dozen because when I do a PowerPoint presentation, 56 names is an awful lot of words on a page for one screen.
It is, yes.
But, you know, I will say 8 or 10, you know, the ones people would recognize, but 56 names for sugar that the FDA allows, that again is criminal. You know? And unfortunately, how do these poor chefs know this? They don't know what they're buying in because they're not getting the truth told by the food manufacturers any more than we are in the market. And as we know, commercial food bought in is very different to domestic a lot of times. You know, so it's even more difficult for them. I've been in huge good supermarkets, gourmet ones, trying to find out what's in the sausages and the rest. Because I miss my sausages. You know, making your own is fine, but it would be nice to have a good sausage sometime. But I mean, trying to find out, you know, if they're gluten-free or free of soy, free of nuts, free of any of those things. You know, because it's true, those top 8 allergens with the milk and the soy and the nuts, but It's everything else they put in as junk, you know?
Right, right.
And it's not fair on chefs. How do they find out? You know,
Right.
I had one friend that's professional thought deep frying killed off the gluten. No, it just adds more gluten to what you're frying. But yeah, that's the level of ignorance. And they don't even know the names for these foods. Yeah, and you're not even the chef and you're having hysterics about it. Hopeless.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my mother did catering. So,
yes.
you know, I grew up in the kitchen from, you know, sort of very, as soon as I could get my eyes and my hands above the counter, I was cooking.
Oh, yeah,
you know.
yeah. Oh, exactly. My parents catered as well in England. My son, for his 8th birthday, I bought him 2 omelette pans because he used to make omelets on a Sunday morning for breakfast, even though he doesn't love eggs in that way. They can be in a cake, but don't give him an egg otherwise. But he used to love his egg with his egg soldiers growing up as a little one.
You never grow out of that, actually.
No. But I, of course, have my electric kettle, and he knew he couldn't really put the electric kettle boiling water into the teapot, so he used to put the tea bags into the electric kettle to make fresh tea on a Sunday morning and bring us omelettes in bed with fresh tea. Age of 8.
Yes.
But he knew better than to do culinary when he graduated. He did business. So. But I keep saying, thank God he knows how to cook, because whatever food allergy, if you can't cook, you're dependent on whatever's out there.
Yeah, very much so.
You know? And the more allergies you get, the more you can't cope with that junk, and you need the real food. Me and my real food again.
So in truth, you should be teaching survivor course in the model world. Well, it's, you know, in order to survive in this world now, you need to know how to cook, right?
Yes. And I taught classes for years upon years for wheat flour, and now I do more one-on-one, you know, a group of 1, 2 or 3 with the gluten-free, because everyone has so many different requirements.
When we were talking earlier, you mentioned you do things 80-20.
Yes.
Now, obviously, that doesn't mean...
It's nice to do them 80-20, yeah,
yes.
I'm just saying it, yes.
But obviously, that doesn't mean when you're doing the 20%, you're obviously not eating gluten or anything you can't eat.
It was more being, you know, follow the healthy cooking 80% of the time, and the 20% of the time you can do the indulgent cooking. You know, which is what they say for an ordinary weight loss diet type thing. But as people say, once you start indulging, it's very difficult to go back to being rigid. You know, I just believe just do real food the whole time and just watch your portions. I mean, as Alain was saying, we don't do the fancy food really so much for themselves. I mean, my favorite breakfast, now they've told me I can't have gluten-free oats, is, I know it doesn't go with the paleo, but I cook the quinoa and I have it with Greek yogurt, fresh blueberries, fresh strawberries, and some nuts. It's fabulous. It keeps me going easily 4 hours because of the protein in it. You know, and that's a world of difference. And I have homemade soup left today, that's the ground pork that you have, and bean sprouts and a whole load of fresh vegetables and soy sauce and garlic and ginger and some noodles. And, you know, that's a meal in a bowl. We had it for dinner one night, and then I just have it for lunch other days. You eat like that, you know. And what did I say we're having tonight? I've forgotten what we're having. My brain's blanked on me. But I know, I was going to do fresh tuna fish with apple and ginger on spaghetti squash. But that's because they had spaghetti squash on sale. You know, and you don't get it that often. And my husband asked for tuna, and I had tuna because we had wild tuna in the market. But I mean, we'll have baked chicken tomorrow.
On the soy sauce, keeping in mind that some soy sauce actually have wheat, so make sure it's gluten-free as well.
Yeah, I use tamari, but people don't know what you're talking about too often when you say tamari. So I use Sanjay as the tamari sauce I use. But yes, you have to be very careful. You have to read the labels of all this stuff each time, because Sanjay does regular soy sauce as well as tamari. So if you don't know and you're looking for the name Sanjay, you can end up buying the wheat one.
Yeah, but the label, the golden, they have the golden label.
If they don't know that, if they're not told that Sanjay does both, and you have to look specifically for that label. I mean, we have a brand here from Maine that does granola. Some of it's gluten-free, some of it isn't, and it's next to each other on the shelf. And if you didn't know and you'd been told this brand was gluten-free, you'd pick up the wrong one. Because unless it clearly says gluten-free, how do you know?
Right. Can you tell us or remind us about your website and your Facebook and all, how people can connect with you?
Well, my business Facebook is Gluten Free Cooking with Oonagh, where I post the magazine articles I write, the television appearances I do, and food I've bought and tried in restaurants. I say my actual email, the easiest one is cookingwithoonagh, spelled OONAGH, at yahoo.com, because the other one with the word temptations in it, lots of schools and businesses don't like the word temptations. What else was there? I am on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, Oonagh Williams, but I don't do nearly as much on that as I should do. My website is royaltemptations.com, but it's full of wheat stuff, so that gets a bit scary for people that are gluten-free. But you can just get me personally that way on cookingwithoonagh at yahoo.com or on the blog Gluten Free Cooking with Oonagh. And they can come and see me in Dallas in a week's time as well, and get me to come into their homes or do Skype with me to talk the way we've been talking. And also I have my YouTube channel of Oonagh Williams with doing gluten-free stuff, as you saw. And you can also find Ordinary Cooking with Oonagh on YouTube and my old recipes on the television. But you have to be careful as to what's gluten-free and not, and how you use it. But yes, you can find me everywhere. There's only one other Oonagh Williams on Facebook, and she's a young one in Germany, so I'm very easy to find. There's not many of them.
Okay.
So
well,
thank you for having me.
Thank you, Oonagh, for being on the Low Carb Paleo Show. And as we say in Texas, à votre santé, y'all.
Yes, I read that one.
Yes, thanks again.
So cheers.
Yes, it's been brilliant. Thank you.
Ta-ta for now.
Oh, lovely.
Oh, yes.